Mr. Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next interview brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians, thanking Seas fans for another great season at the Nat this spring and summer. If you're looking to guarantee your seat for all the action in 2025, please visit CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. We welcome in Jeff Paterson, the host of Rinkwide Vancouver. They were back at it again this weekend, and of course, we'll have you covered post-game throughout the season starting Wednesday. Our Canucks reporter joins us after a busy weekend for the Canucks, Jeff, and busy Monday as well on the waiver wire. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Excited about Wednesday night, but a lot of distance to be traveled between now and Wednesday. So it was an eventful weekend. Skated twice at UBC. It's been a crazy month of September and into October with concerts at Rogers Arena. They want to fill that building. So the hockey club without the practice facility gets bumped to UBC. So they were out there twice on campus over the weekend, and lots going on there. And then obviously a lot going on off the ice with the hockey club as well.
Start with Nils Höglander and the contract extension, 3x3. What's your take?
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. There hadn't really been any peep, but look, for Höglander, I think it's a great deal. If you're going to negotiate, do it off a 24-goal season. We know his story, right? 24 goals, all at even strength, the energy, and the motor's always running. And he's had a terrific camp. And I had a chance to talk to him in Penticton. He said he had never felt better. This is his fifth training camp. He's getting set to open his fifth season. He's only 23. He'll turn 24 in December, so a late birth date. But time marches on. This is year number 5 for Nils Höglander, and just said that now he has a baseline of what it takes to be a professional, and so felt that he had never come to camp feeling this good about things, and right from day one of camp on a line with Atu Ratu and Connor Garland. And they were the stars of training camp, and they had a nice run through the preseason before Garland exited the other day at the morning skate. But look, there were questions about Höglander, right? 20% shooting last year. That's going to be hard to replicate. And ultimately, where does he slot into this lineup? But I like where he is in the here and now, sort of in that third line position. But of course, what happens when Demco and Joshua gets back in there? So lots of moving parts around this player, and ultimately where he slots in, I think that's still to be determined. We saw what happened in the playoffs after the 24 goals in the regular season. Really struggled in his first look at Stanley Cup playoff action. And so, do I expect that he's going to be a 24-goal scorer this time around? Probably not, but I'd like to think that he will draw on all of his successes last year and the fact that he sort of forced the issue and worked his way up the lineup and ultimately capitalized on the chances that he was able to create for himself. We know he's fearless. He'll go to the front of the net, loose pucks, all of those types of things. But I do wonder, as they've increased the winger depth in this hockey club, is that going to eat into his production? And I think that's a fair question. And so we'll see how it goes and where it goes from here. But ultimately, this is a guy that had arbitration rights next year. If he had had back-to-back 20-goal seasons,
that's right,
he's probably getting a whole lot more than $3 million per. So I think it's a great deal for the hockey club. There's cost certainty there. There's a real opportunity, I think, to extract some value. And now it's up to this player just to keep chipping away at some of those areas that the coaches, and he's had 3 coaches in the NHL, and they've all sort of had the same book on him, chip away at those deficiencies and continue to build on the strength and the assets. And I think he can be part of what the Canucks are putting together here.
Even if his regular season stuff goes down, though, could he see more power play time? Not on PP1 likely, but I mean, he doesn't have any power play production to speak of. Maybe he buffers the loss of those 24 goals at even strength with some power play production.
Yep, and he scored a power play goal in the preseason opener against Seattle, the first preseason goal the Canucks scored. Nice goal. He's the bumper guy on that quick bang down low and into the slot play. So, yes, I think he's going to be. He's featured on the power play too whenever they've lined up and practiced through the preseason. I think he has a spot there. Ultimately, where on that power play, is he the net front guy? Is he a down low guy? I don't think that he's going to be one of the half walls. So, he's going to have to settle in and kind of find his groove when it comes to the power play. But yeah, I would think that after 24 at even strength last year, he's got to have a couple of power play goals in his back pocket if that second unit gets some opportunities. And certainly they've built up the skill level around him on that second unit. So let's see where things go for him and the hockey club. But again, I don't know that he needs to get to 24 goals, but if he can be in that 15 to 18, if he can push 20 again, I think it can still be a really successful season for Nils Höglander, even if he doesn't achieve or exceed what he was able to produce last year.
Darren Dreger gave us the news today, Jeff. 3 to 4 weeks for both Dakota Joshua and Thatcher Demko. First time we've heard timelines on these players. They play 9 games in October. They have 7 between now and the game 3 weeks from today against Carolina. They have 10 over the next course of the full month, including the first game in November against San Jose. How do you think they'll maintain minus these 2 guys?
Right, and I should say that my partner on Rink Wider, Fai Gafar, had said on Friday night after the game he thought Halloween was sort of the date that he had circled, so that lines up with what Darren was telling you guys as well. I think, with all due respect to Irf and to Darren, though, there's just still so much uncertainty when it comes to Thatcher Demko that, let's see what these next couple of weeks bring. He was on the ice every day at Penticton. We reported that. We had video of him. Now, it was progression, certainly, but he wasn't facing NHL shooters. He wasn't doing a ton of blue paint and scramble play work. It was the basics of his movements and just going through repetition. So from what I saw in Penticton, and that's the last time I've seen Thatcher Demko on the ice, it's my understanding that he is taking ice on his own well before the prying eyes of the media are allowed in the building. But I can't report that for myself. I haven't seen him since training camp. So it's one of those things for me, until I see him again and see him starting to ramp things up, that will give us a much better sense. Like, I'm glad to hear 3 to 4 weeks, but given all that he's been through going back to last March, I just think it's probably impossible for anybody to really pinpoint when we're going to see him join the group for practice. And then from there, how long is it going to take him to ramp up to game speed? Now, for Dakota Joshua, he's been around the group. I've seen him in sweats out at UBC when they've been practicing there, sort of in the hallways. To the best of my knowledge, he hasn't been on the ice yet, but I thought, and you guys probably saw this as well, he did a public appearance, a card signing over the weekend in North Vancouver. Like, I think that has to speak to him being in a really good headspace to deal with the public, know that he's going to get asked a ton of time about his health and his well-being and probably a timeline for return. If he didn't feel comfortable putting himself in that sort of situation, I think he would have absolutely had license to say, you know what, I'll do this later in the year, but I'm not going to do it right now. So maybe a small thing, but I think, to me, I just reading that and people that I saw a lot on social, that he was terrific with his time and gracious and posing for photos and autographs and all that kind of stuff. So to me, that speaks highly of the headspace that he's in as he recovers from his battle with cancer. And I know Rick Tocchet said last week, he's going to go out on the first big road trip. The Tocchet wanted him around. They love his personality and just his presence in the group. He was there at training camp. So, all of those things are positives, but ultimately he's a hockey player and we have yet to see him on the ice playing hockey. So again, hard to know for sure, but just sort of following the breadcrumbs that are being presented to us right now.
And unlike Demko, who appears to be in at least second gear, we know he's on the ice. We know he's, we've already seen him working out with the Canucks. He can at least just shift it into the next gear when he needs to. I'm going to guess Dakota Joshua probably needs to start almost from ground zero in terms of his off-season prep. I don't know, when the last time he was on ice, or we know he's not been on ice with teammates at the very least. So he's probably coming from a deeper spot than Demko is.
Yeah, it's my understanding that he was a participant in that Troy Stetcher pro camp in August. Like, the diagnosis, I think, came late in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of, like, again, I've seen him around just in workout gear, but, I would imagine when you go through something like this, there's probably some weight loss involved and hasn't been able to rigorously train the way that his colleagues are. And we always say this about anybody. Last year it was Teddy Bluger and Carson Soucy that got hurt in the preseason finale. You're out a while. Now you've got to hit the ground running and try and catch up to guys that have had a full camp and a preseason and then have played however many regular season games. So that's part of the challenge, I think, for Dakota Joshua. And you're right. If he's starting really from standing still, it's going to be a challenge. But he's got the security of his new contract in his back pocket, and that should free him up, hopefully, to find his groove and pick up where he left off last year with the 18 goals that he scored. And of course, it was in 63 games. So it was definitely tracking on sort of a 20 to 25 goal pace and all the other things that he brings to this hockey club. They're going to miss him without a doubt. But health is first and foremost. You're nothing without your health, and Dakota Joshua would be the first to tell you that. So let's get him completely healthy, get the clean bill of health and the green light to resume training, and then ultimately working his way to practice and then to games.
Okay, now the trade. I don't think we've ever gone 10 minutes with Jeff before asking him about a Canucks trade, but here we are. They made a trade yesterday too. Third year in a row, Jeff, that they've used this weekend prior to roster setting to make a deal. It was Jason Dickinson, it was Casey DeSmith, and now it's Eric Brannstrom, who clears waivers and thus will be available to them. He's been a full-time NHL player the last couple of years after some failure to launch, and he's a different profile of defense than what they've got currently on the third pair. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he is a project at this point, 25 now, and if he's a late bloomer, great. I'm all for it, but there have to be some reasons why he hasn't hit the way that he was projected to as a mid-first round pick back in his draft class of 2017. So he's been at this a while as a pro and has had some moments, as you said, just reading accounts of his time in Ottawa. There were moments when the Senators had injuries on the back end that he was promoted and given more of an opportunity. And it sounds like, he played all right, but you just wonder why he hasn't really been able to lock down full-time employment, especially as a first-round guy, a little bit undersized, obviously, as a defenseman, but we've certainly seen that small guys can and often do, find their way. And Quinn Hughes is perfect proof. I'm not comparing those two players, but look, getting Brannstrom to me was sort of the afterthought. Like I figured if they were going to move Tucker Poolman, they were going to have to attach a sweetener, and I was prepared for that, I suppose. But to get a prospect, a guy that could, at some point, if he develops, get an opportunity to play here, that's obviously more than a throw-in, but it's a nice addition in terms of a return for the Vancouver Canucks. So yeah, I think all around. Looked like pretty savvy business by the part of this management group. And again, as you said, a track record on the eve of these roster setting days. Sam Lafferty was a late addition last year as well, just ahead of the start of the season for the Vancouver Canucks. So, perhaps this is management identifying, a point in the schedule where they recognize that there are deals to be had, not afraid to pull the trigger, obviously. And we'll see where things go. I noted on Twitter earlier today that, there's a glut of left-handed defensemen down on the farm. And that's not a bad thing. Depth of defense is never a bad thing. But you just wonder about pathways for guys like Kirill Kudratsev and Elias Paterson. You don't want them to be roadblocked by a stack of sort of mid to aging veterans that are down there. Christian Wolanin, now Brannstrom. I don't know what the organization's plans are for Guillaume Brisebois, but he's in Abbotsford right now. And by my count, there were at least 6 and maybe 7. So we'll see if somebody has to slide over to the right side and sort of learn the program over there. Kudratsev's done that a little bit and has that in his arsenal. So perhaps he's the guy, whatever the case, to get a player that has some potential still, although I'm leery to say that about a 25-year-old. You don't wonder if he is what he is at this stage. Regardless, they got a warm body that can certainly help them at the minor league level and maybe someday will crack the NHL lineup for the Vancouver Canucks.
Hey, nearly 150 games of NHL experience in the last 2 seasons for him. So, for Brannstrom, I mean, he is an option. And
he's an option against different profiles of teams, right? Like sometimes you're going to want to dress guys who fit better against a different profile of teams. So I could absolutely see a day where Brannstrom is up here and playing instead of Forbert on the third pair when you want a little bit more puck transporting and movement there, when you're not quite as maybe concerned about the beef and
a different option than Juleson, right? If they wanted to make that swap, in terms of a true possession guy.
I mean, and worst in a horrible world where Quinn Hughes gets hurt, you have a guy who, I don't want to say a similar profile because he's obviously not anywhere close to Quinn Hughes, but he moves the puck with his skating and with his stick.
He's in that vein, yes.
Don't really have that on the left side outside of Quinn.
And Jeff, are they now amongst the deepest NHL teams in terms of goal with the reacquisition of Jiri Patera? I mean, I would have been just fine looking at the depth and looking at the complication when Demco returns of them just leaving that well enough alone, but they go out and bring him back.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that they reclaimed him. I mean, they wanted a guy. Obviously, they signed him in the offseason. They were hoping to have him in the organization. And then Boston, I think, got to a little bit of panic mode late in the day with the Jeremy Swayman situation. Whatever the case, Patera is back. And so now you've got Patera, who has 8 games of NHL experience under his belt, and Nikita Tilapilo, who they're still very high on, but hasn't been able to see NHL ice and only got 20 minutes in the preseason. I think it was important, though, to get Patera back in the organization, or at least somebody with some professional experience. This is Manny Malholtzer's first year down there. This is an organization that doesn't leave a lot to chance. You don't want to hamstring a first-year professional head coach with goaltending issues. And if they lose Patera, and if Tolopilo was to go down early in the season, then what? You want to get off to a decent start. Now, again, so much of this tracks back to Thatcher Demko and his health and well-being. And whenever he is able to resume playing for the Vancouver Canucks, they're going to have decisions to make. Obviously, they can send Silovs down with a waivers, and then you get a bit of a logjam down in the minor league level. And 3 goalies, to me, isn't really a great setup at any level of hockey, certainly professional hockey. There's only 2 nets there, and it gets clunky at practice time and then trying to find starts for guys. But you deal with that, and you'll cross that bridge when you get to it. They've got to get Thatcher Demko up and running, and then the dominoes will fall from there. But in the short term, and Rick Tocchet told me yesterday out at UBC, Artur Silovs, in all likelihood on Wednesday, but he wants to get Kevin Lankinen in there, get him some early season starts as well. He sort of sees it as an open competition, if you will, off the hop here, that Silovs isn't his guy just because Silovs was here and had the playoff run. The organization likes what they've seen from Kevin Lankinen so far. Tocchet keeps talking about his puck handling ability, and that's something that sort of sets him apart from Silovs, because I found it interesting. Tocchet said that's something we're continuing to work with Arturs on. So clearly they see that as an area that already has to get his game up to speed at the NHL level, and that is handling the puck. And apparently Kevin Lankinen already ahead of him in that regard. So something to watch for when Lankinen does, in fact, get the crease for the Vancouver Canucks.
Wonderful stuff, Jeff. Well, busy weekend, busy week ahead. It all gets going Wednesday against the Calgary Flames here at Rogers Arena. And of course, we'll be watching practice intently we'll be listening to management later today, and then watching practice intently on Tuesday to see how it's all going to line up for the opener. Appreciate this. Talk later in the week.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Thanks.